The danger you never see coming. Most dangerous animals look dangerous. Sharp teeth, massive claws, a warning growl that tells you to stay away. But the animals in this video play by different rules. Some look elegant. Some seem almost harmless. Some are so common that people walk past them every single day, without a second thought. And that's exactly what makes them so dangerous. Because in nature, the greatest threat isn't always the one that looks the most terrifying. Sometimes, it's the one that gives you just enough confidence to step one pace too close. And once you realize your mistake, it may already be too late. Canada. Goose the bully nobody takes seriously. If you asked someone to name the most intimidating animal in North America, very few people would say, a goose. And that's exactly why so many people underestimate them. Canada geese live almost everywhere humans do. Parks, golf courses, school fields, office lawns, quiet ponds beside busy roads. They look familiar, ordinary, almost harmless, until one decides you've crossed a line. A threatened Canada goose doesn't need claws or fangs. It lowers its head, stretches its neck, hisses, and then it comes straight at you. Not with the hesitation of a small animal trying to bluff, but with the confidence of something that genuinely expects you to move. And during nesting season, that confidence becomes even more intense. People get chased off paths. Cyclists are forced to swerve. Children learn very quickly that a bird with a 7-pound body can still control an entire section of a park. That's what makes the Canada goose such a perfect first warning. Danger doesn't always arrive looking dangerous. Sometimes, it walks toward you on webbed feet. And the next animal makes an even bigger mistake possible, because unlike the goose, it looks like something nature designed to be admired. Mute swan. Beauty with a temper. The Canada goose looks harmless because it feels ordinary. A mute swan is even more deceptive, because everything about it suggests elegance, white feathers, a long curved neck, a quiet glide across the water. For centuries, swans have been symbols of romance, grace, even devotion. But get too close during nesting season, and that image disappears fast. A territorial mute swan doesn't need to look angry. It only needs to decide that you don't belong there. Then the posture changes. The wings rise, the body turns toward you, and suddenly, that beautiful bird becomes a 30-pound wall of muscle, bone, and momentum. Swans have been known to charge kayaks, chase swimmers, and strike with the hard leading edge of their wings. Not because they are cruel, not because they hate people, but because once a swan believes you're a threat, it commits. That's what makes the encounter so dangerous. You don't expect violence from something that looks like it belongs on a postcard. And that hesitation can cost you the few seconds you needed to move away. The swan teaches a simple lesson. Beauty is not the same thing as safety. And the next animal is even more unsettling because it may remember exactly who you are. Australian magpie, the one that remembers you. A swan becomes dangerous when you cross into its space. The Australian magpie can make things far more personal. For most of the year, it is just another familiar bird, black and white, sharp-eyed, often heard before it is seen. Then nesting season arrives, and suddenly, the sky itself becomes part of the threat. Magpies are famous for swooping people who pass through their territory, cyclists, joggers, schoolchildren, postal workers. But the unsettling part isn't simply the attack, it's the memory behind it. Australian magpies can recognize individual human faces, which means one bad encounter may not end when you leave. The same bird can react to the same person again, days, weeks, even much later. That changes the entire feeling of the encounter. You're no longer just crossing a territory. You may be crossing a territory where something already knows who you are and remembers. The swan protects a place. The magpie remembers a face. And once an animal can recognize you, every future encounter becomes a little less predictable, because memory changes everything. But even memory has limits. The next animal doesn't need to remember your face. It only needs one perfect opportunity, because sometimes the most dangerous hunter is the one you never think to look for. Above you. Crowned eagle. The hunter above. Most predators need you to see them coming. The crowned eagle doesn't. High in the forests of sub-Saharan Africa, it watches from a place most people forget to check, above. From the canopy, movement below becomes a pattern. A monkey crossing a branch, a small antelope moving through cover, a shape separating from the group. And then, the distance disappears. The crowned eagle is not the largest eagle in the world, but relative to its size, it is one of the most powerful. Its entire body is built around one idea: strike first, strike hard, and end the struggle quickly. What makes that unsettling for humans is not simply its strength. It is the history behind it. Fossil evidence suggests that large eagles preyed on early human ancestors millions of years ago. Long before we dominated the ground, something in the trees was already watching primates from above. That changes the way you look at the sky, because danger doesn't always charge. Sometimes, it waits where you never think to look, and the next animal brings that danger back to the ground. Only this time, it carries a blade on each foot. Cassowary, the living blade. The crowned eagle reminds us that danger can come from above. The cassowary proves it doesn't need wings to feel prehistoric. At first glance, it doesn't even look like a threat. A colorful neck, a strange helmet on its head, thick black feathers that almost resemble coarse hair, more curious than frightening, until it starts to move. The cassowary is one of the few birds alive today that can make people feel as if they've stepped back into the age of dinosaurs. Every part of its body is built for one purpose: power. Strong legs drive it effortlessly through dense rainforest, and on each foot, a long dagger-like claw waits for the moment it is needed. Unlike many animals that bluff before a fight, a cassowary relies on speed. One explosive charge, one perfectly timed kick, and those claws become weapons capable of causing devastating injuries. That's why experienced rangers in northern Australia and New Guinea treat every wild cassowary with quiet respect. Not because it is constantly aggressive, but because once it decides to defend itself, there is almost no time to react. The cassowary teaches us that appearances can be deeply misleading. Sometimes, the closest thing the modern world has to a dinosaur isn't hiding in a museum, it's walking silently through the rainforest. And the next animal doesn't rely on claws from above or blades on its feet. It relies on something far simpler: pure momentum. Wild boar the charge. You don't want the cassowary turns its legs into weapons. The wild boar turns its entire body into one. At first, it doesn't look especially fast. Heavy shoulders, a low center of gravity, a body built more for pushing through brush than chasing anything down. And that is exactly why the first charge can be so shocking. A wild boar can explode out of cover with almost no warning. One moment, the forest is still. The next, hundreds of pounds of muscle are already moving toward you. The tusks matter, but the real danger begins before they ever make contact. Speed, weight, momentum. Once a boar commits to the charge, everything happens too quickly for calm decisions. And because its attack comes low, the legs become the first target. Lose your balance, and the entire encounter changes. What makes the wild boar dangerous isn't that it wants a fight. Most would rather avoid one. But when cornered, wounded, or surprised, it doesn't need to be the largest animal in the forest. It only needs a few seconds, and enough space to accelerate. The boar teaches us that danger isn't always about teeth or claws. Sometimes, it's simply mass, moving in your direction. And the next animal takes that same idea to a scale where one mistake can become catastrophic. Hippopotamus, no room for mistakes. The wild boar teaches us. That danger can arrive in an instant. The hippopotamus teaches us something even harsher. Sometimes, there isn't a second chance. At first glance, a hippo doesn't seem built for speed. Its massive body drifts quietly through the water. Its eyes barely break the surface. Most of the time, it appears almost motionless, peaceful, almost lazy, and that illusion has misled people for generations. Because beneath the calm water, a hippo is constantly watching. Every movement, every sound, every step that comes too close. When it decides you've crossed an invisible boundary, there is no warning roar, no dramatic display, just an explosion of muscle powerful enough to launch several thousand pounds forward with astonishing speed. For something so enormous, it moves with terrifying confidence. Boats have been overturned, people have been chased onto land, and once the attack begins, outrunning it is rarely an option. That's why guides who spend their lives around hippos all share the same rule. Never mistake silence for safety. Because the most dangerous part of a hippopotamus isn't its size. It's the false sense of security it gives you just before it moves. And the final animal doesn't need to chase at all. It simply waits, patiently, knowing that sooner or later, someone will come to the water. Nile crocodile, the one that waits, the hippopotamus teaches us. That danger can explode without warning. The Nile crocodile teaches us something even more unsettling. The most successful hunter rarely needs to rush. At the edge of a river, everything appears calm. The water barely moves. Birds continue calling. Fish break the surface. Nothing seems out of place. And that's exactly how the crocodile wants it. For hours, sometimes even longer, it can remain almost perfectly still, watching, waiting, measuring every movement along the shoreline. A thirsty antelope, a careless bird, someone stepping closer to the water than they should. The attack itself lasts only seconds, but the decision to attack may have been made long before. That's what makes the Nile crocodile so different from every animal we've seen today. The goose wants you to leave. The swan defends its nest. The magpie remembers your face. The eagle strikes from above. The cassowary reacts. The boar charges. The hippo explodes. But the crocodile simply waits. Because patience is its greatest weapon. It doesn't need to chase you. It only needs to believe that eventually you'll come close enough on your own. And perhaps that's the most dangerous illusion in nature. The feeling that nothing is happening when everything already is. Throughout this journey, we've met animals that looked surprisingly ordinary. A goose in the park, a graceful swan, a familiar bird in the neighborhood, even a quiet river that seemed completely still. Yet every one of them reminded us of the same lesson. Nature doesn't always announce danger. It doesn't always growl or show its teeth. Sometimes it wears white feathers. Sometimes it stands perfectly motionless. And sometimes it waits so patiently that you convince yourself nothing is there. Perhaps that's why the most dangerous mistake isn't getting too close to a wild animal. It's believing you already know which animals deserve your respect. Because in the wild, appearances can be comforting, but they can also be the greatest illusion of all. If you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to subscribe to Wild Unknown, because nature is full of stories that challenge everything we think we know.